Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Having a little bit of difficulty shaking this cold. I don't know what it is, but it just does not seem to want to go away. It's not really super bad, but I like to be generally 100%, It's just how I like to live life. We'll see how things work out. Big day for me today. I went to a neighboring city called Guapolis, and I got my fingerprints sent by DHL to Canada for my background check. So that is the final requisite for all of my documentation. And so I'm well on my way to a residency application, which, is long overdue, I guess. I've been a kind of a stateless person for quite some time now. The idea of residency is a very interesting thing, It has to do with where your tax liability lies. And if you don't have residency anywhere, legal residency, then you enter into this kind of, I don't know how you would call it, kind of like almost like a gray zone, if you will. And let me just get that all up. There we go. And because I can't speak for America. The United States is a very unique legal and social entity. It differs from most of the countries in a number of ways. For example, Americans maintain a tax liability no matter where they are in the world. So if you're American and you move to Zimbabwe, I'm not sure how much it is. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it's like $70,000 you're allowed to make. But if you make anything more than that, you owe income taxes in the United States. Well, it's kind of an interesting concept, but I mean, other countries are not the same. Like, for example, as a Canadian, or I think Australians are the same, and the Brits are the same. If you're out of the country for 183 days in a year, which would be one day over half the year, 183 and 183 is 366, right? And there's 365 days in a year. Then you have no tax liability. It's very interesting how it all works, but the time has come for me to consolidate my position here. And it begins with permanent residence, and then it moves from there to citizenship. And so that doesn't mean that I necessarily revoke the citizenship of my birth, but I become like our erstwhile Hebrew friends, and I become a dual citizen. And I think having more than one citizenship is a very good thing in today's day and age. It's just the way I feel about it. Now it's come to my attention that some people were a little disturbed by last night's podcast, Defilement. And I'm always interested to hear what people think about what I'm saying. I'm saying it in a public way. I'm recording it. I'm putting the recording up so anybody can listen to it. So it would be disingenuous of me to say that I am not interested in what people think of it or anything like that. And I don't want to be disingenuous, so I am. quite interested actually in how you folks feel about that. Um, Allow me to say or begin by saying, and um, if anything, I am understating. Okay? If anything, I am understating how serious the situation is. Now, I will say this, that when I say serious, I mean, I guess, our way of life, our mortal existence, these sorts of things, that's what I'm really referring to. Um, I'm not necessarily referring to anything of an eternal nature. That stuff's always sort of running tangential alongside our physical existence. The physical existence is what we have, in a sense, been conscripted to experience. And we've come here to experience it. And so everybody here is wanting to go through what we have to go through. Now, I know that sounds antithetical, but antithetical to what? To what you've been taught in the North American education system? To what you've been taught by your financial advisor who's helping you plan your 401k and your retirement? Remember, God doesn't give a shit about any of that stuff. Those are human concerns. Okay? And they're necessary concerns, and I don't mean to belittle them. There's nothing wrong with being a well-planned human being and having your life structured a certain way and preparing for the future. It's all good. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying that there are going to be times when you're living on this planet where the very best of your planning is going to get steamrolled. And when that happens, you just have to kind of surrender to the circumstance and go, I guess this was meant to happen. And we're definitely in something like that now. I don't think any other way to look at what's going on around us. Now, I base my opinions on an acute observation of what's going on around me. Okay, I don't have any insider teletype information. There's nobody dropping information in my email. This is just me perceiving the world and asking myself why people would do what they're doing. Okay? And to achieve this perceptual lucidity, you have to do away with all sentiment. You have to learn to perceive correctly, and perceiving correctly is, let's call it a consciousness art form, and it has to do with the non-pollution of your perceptual palette. And this would have to be in alignment with, I'm going to introduce a new expression unique to the Talamanca Review. You'll get it right away. An unpolluted imagination. A person who does not fantasize and who does not allow themselves to be programmed. Okay? Now, it's possible to exist in your society and get along with people and seem normal and not be programmed. I mean, sometimes you just have to get along, right? Sometimes you just have to go along to get along. And so perception is an art form. It's a spiritual art. Okay? And I'm not talking about, psychic abilities like the galactic fucktard in Cincinnati or any of these fucktards on Gaia or any of these morons, okay? That's not what I mean. That is basically not good perception. Psychic data is unreliable. Okay? Psychic data is always, always, always unreliable. You can't go to the bank on psychic data. You can't go to the bank on remote viewing. You can't really take any of these people that seriously. Courtney Brown, Carrie Cassidy, these are spiritually unbalanced people who are substituting some consciousness trick they learned for perception. And it's not perception. It's just, the data is not supposed to exist in a sense. Let's put it that way. So if the data is not supposed to exist, what is the data going to do? And why is the data not supposed to exist? The data is not supposed to exist because we're not supposed to be gaining information with these perceptual hacks. And psychic arts are perceptual hacks. Okay? It's like hacking a computer. They're perceptual hacks. And the people who've pioneered a lot of this stuff are the intelligence agencies after World War II. Again, we go back to this same timeline from The Devil in Us, A Memoir of You and Me. And if you haven't read that book, you should read that book. And a lot of the information in the public space now is profoundly hacked information. There's not really that much information in the public space that is from a sound spiritual source. Okay? And I don't know why that is in this particular age we're living. But it just seems to be an age of really compromised and miscontextualized data. And so yeah, let's leave that alone for now. The most important data is the data that comes from your heart. And understanding the heart is really difficult. I mean, they have spent decades corrupting the heart. Decades. Hollywood's been in on it. The music industry's been in on it. The literary business has been in on it. The Kabbalists, the highly cynical Jews have been in on it. Always presenting this super dark reality, where we've, in a sense, been abandoned by God. It's a godless world. I'm talking about not about how we live and comport ourselves in private with our loved ones and with people who share our consciousness. I'm talking about the public space, how we discuss things publicly, whether it be through our broadcasting systems, whether it be through controlled, regulated, or censored social media, whether it be through our newspapers, whether it be through our publishing industry. And the whole system is hell-bent on proving itself. And this idea that we have to prove everything we say is it's a very Jewish idea. You know, it begins with the early 20th century proofs of the new thinking leaders, the new thought leaders. Really, they weren't thought leaders. Einstein was a goof. Really was. You got to read up on Einstein. Complete fucking fraud. Sigmund Freud was a pedophile, a rapist, a cocaine addict. I believe he practiced incest. Just an absolute piece of shit of a human being. A Sabbatean Frankist, basically. Whether he was initiated or not. Okay? And so much of the 20th century, which, by the way, 3 generations is an enormous amount of time to work on a people. So I'm explaining to you now how you became defiled. And defilement is the first phase. Phase 2 is desecration. Phase 3 is decimation. Defilement, desecration, decimation. Okay? And let's call it the 3 stages of spiritual warfare. In a sense, I don't know why people concatenate the words spiritual and warfare. Because in a sense, all warfare is spiritual. All of it. All warfare is inherently spiritual. Because when you're fighting to live, you're in a spiritual battle because life is a spiritual gift. So all warfare is fundamentally spiritual. And so therefore the way to wage war, and the very best at it on the planet right now, are the Jews. They are the masters of war. Do not be deceived by a document as trite as The Art of War by Sun Tzu, or the various biographies of generals and war legends in the annals of West Point or any other military academy. When you truly understand what war is, you can come to no conclusion other than the masters of warfare are, in fact, the Jews, led by their rabbis. I'm wondering if I need to go into that anymore or if it's self-evident. I sometimes wonder aloud, you know. I will add perhaps, maybe if I get a lot of comments, if I wake up tomorrow morning and there's a lot of comments about what did you mean by that, then I'll go into more depth in a subsequent podcast. But for tonight, I'll just leave it off at the motto of the Mossad, which has really been the motto of the Zionists and the military. Zionism is militant Judaism. Okay? So the acquisition of land through violence or duplicity or sabotage is the very nature of warfare, because land is the very definition of wealth on this planet. It's not gold, it's not silver, it's not titanium, it's not US dollars, it's not British pounds, it's not Chinese yuan. The only real wealth on the planet, when you really think about it, is arable land that a family can live on and water on that land, or water coming to that land, even if you gather your water through rainfall or what have you, okay? So the masters of warfare in our time, and for quite some time now actually, have been the Jews. There's no other way to put it, okay? And I would say mainly because of the deceptive nature of the agenda. Okay? I think that in warfare there have always been rules. Number one, when you're at war with somebody, you have to declare the war. You have to openly declare it. There are spiritual laws to war, and war is a viable spiritual practice. By the way, if you think God shuns war, you're a fucking idiot. Sorry. I don't know why I'm in a bit of a mood tonight. It's this fucking cold, man. It just puts me in a mood. I just don't feel like biting my tongue or being polite or anything like that. Let me grab a coffee and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. And I was talking about warfare and the proficiency of the organized Jewish people at warfare. And I suppose they've always been relatively good at this, but the regrouped Judaica through Zionism and the migration back to Israel has produced a kind of murderous agenda, which is hitting its crescendo now. And they don't seem too concerned about us seeing it, which I think you should take note of, right? Because it's breaking the cover of war by deception. And I don't necessarily think it's an error on their part. And what I mean by that is they have reason to believe that they are perhaps untouchable at this point. And they may very well be right, because there doesn't seem to be anybody on the world stage, with the exception of China, quite frankly, that is openly critical of the Jewish agenda and the Palestinian plight at a nation-state level. I mean, there's a lot of nations that vote against them in the United Nations and stuff, but I mean, at the big player level, the people who really matter, it's just China as far as I can see. Russia backs Israel for the most part, and that has to do, according to Putin, with the 2 million or so Russian Jews in Israel. So many, in fact, that Putin jokingly describes Russian as the official second language of Israel. Not Arabic, Russian. So Hebrew and then Russian. So let's go on to the next phase of this, okay? Which I think is to understand what desecration is, you have to understand what consecration is. Because when I'm using these words in context to this suite of material that I'm presenting to you, I'm using the words in their correct form. I'm not using them in a colloquial fashion or in a stylized way. I'm using these words within their original meaning, intent, and etymology. Okay? So to understand desecrate, it's an antipode, which means it's an opposite word, like black, white, man, woman. So the antipode of desecrate is consecrate. So, and it precedes desecrate. So in our language, there was no word desecrate. It evolved out of consecrate, meaning that at some point, the church authorities felt the need to invent a word, or social thinkers or social pundits felt the need to evolve a word which represented the opposite of consecrate, which is an unfortunate evolution in language, actually, when you think that word is even needed. And it makes you think about the evolution of language and the necessity of words and why they're created. You take a word like genocide, it hasn't been around that long, and now it's an almost indispensable word. It's a daily use word now, okay? So it's an unfortunate evolution in our language. Language will always tell you what's going on because people have to express themselves, and therefore the language has to adapt and improvise and overcome limitations. And invent new forms of expression, which are, of course, words or verbs or things like this. Okay. So the word consecrate refers to the act of making something sacred or dedicating it to a holy purpose. Beautiful word, right? Consecrate. You see it come up in the colloquial sometimes, like they use it in John Wick. You ever notice how much religious language there is in John Wick? In the John Wick series, it's a very, very, very Catholic premise. The whole underworld, everything, right? And if you follow the series, I'll just briefly allude to it. I think it's in John Wick 3 when the adjuster goes to the Continental Hotel in New York, run by that wonderful British actor. I forget his name. Shane something, I forget. They deconsecrate. They used the word deconsecrate the hotel. So the hotel was consecrated, and then they deconsecrate it. Okay. It's actually, if I was on the writing team, I would have pointed out to them that the word deconsecrate doesn't exist, that the antipode to consecrate is desecrate. But alas, they didn't ring me up and ask me for my language advice on the crafting of the John Wick screenplays. So the etymology and history of consecrate are as follows. Consecrate entered the English language in the late 14th century, which 1500s. Its origin lies in the Latin verb consecrare, C-O-N-S-E-C-R-A-R-E, consecrare, which means to make holy or to devote. And this Latin term is formed from com, an assimilated form of con, C-O-N, meaning with or together. And it's the same thing in Spanish. We still have that language. I'm going to town with my wife. Yo voy a la ciudad con mi esposa, with my wife. With or together, but often used as an intensifier in Latin, suggesting thoroughly or completely. And sacrare, S-A-C-R-A-R-E, meaning to make or declare sacred, sacrare. This in turn comes from sacer, which is a genitive sacri, which means sacred, dedicated, holy, accursed. The Proto-Indo-European root is sac, S-A-K, which means to sanctify. So the literal meaning of consecrare is to make something thoroughly sacred or to fully dedicate it. And the English verb consecrate directly reflects this Latin origin. Amazing, right? The degree to which Latin... In a sense, the rabbis are right. We are Rome. And if you follow the language, we are Rome. And language is language is the definition of a people. And I'm not sure you can fully understand that until you live in more than one language. If you listen to the Talamanca Review and you were raised by immigrant parents, and in your home you spoke Romanian or Bulgarian or Russian or Polish, and then you learned English alongside your friends in school, and then you had two languages your whole life, you will understand that language is a system of thinking. It's not just a way of communicating information. It is a system of thinking. The way verbs go together, the way a whole language works. So I live and function in Spanish now. And this is the third language I've lived and functioned in. I guess you could say fourth if I threw French in. And every time you learn a language, you gain a little bit more understanding of the whole world, because there's a whole bunch of people who live within that language, depending on what language you learn. So, historically, the concept of consecration has been central to many religious traditions, involving rituals, prayers, and ceremonies to set apart persons, places, or objects for divine service. This practice is evident in ancient Judaism, where priests, altars, and the tabernacle temple were consecrated. And it continued into Christianity. Consecration is a part of ritual magic as well. You have to clean space, if you will, create a conduciveness in the ether for the teleportation of that which you're trying to communicate with. And if there's a bunch of heavy thoughts or impure things around, they may block the success of the ritual. And this goes for religious rituals as well. I mean, except for Islam, which is, I think, largely a pure prayer program. By the way, that's another interesting thing about Islam, by the way, as we look at the Islamic system. Islam does completely away with all rituals. And so you can see, with the Jews, it's an entirely ritualistic religion. Entirely ritualistic, and which is why the Jews are so proficient in ritual magic, okay? And then when you get into the Catholics, the ritual is extended. I mean, the Mass itself is a ritual. You drink the body and blood of Christ in effigy. It's actually wine, and the host, for those of you who are Catholic, you know what I'm talking about. So it's a blood ritual in effigy. It's quite foul and disgusting, actually, as far as I'm concerned. And then you see with the Protestant movement, there is a kind of Islamification of the Gospels, in which the Protestant approach is more a thinking person's approach. What is this Christ dude actually saying? How do we live like this? And they do away with the ritual magic, with the exception of perhaps the Anglicans, who were trying to open up their, the English were trying to open up their own little Vatican with the Anglican Church, I think. Tremendous similarities between the Anglicans and the Catholics. But as Protestantism proliferates, the presence of ritual is more and more and more diminished. So there's no Mass in Protestant liturgies. There's no consumption of a host. There's no symbolic drinking of blood. In fact, there's no approaching the altar where the pastor speaks at all. Whereas in a Catholic service, everybody goes up to the altar near the end and receives their Holy Communion. And so there's a lot of movement and a lot of timed and ritualistic standing and sitting in the Catholic service. It's highly ritualistic, okay? But less so than the rabbis. The rabbis are pure ritual. And the reconstruction of the Temple of Solomon is about the resurrection of the great high days of ritual magic. Make no mistake about it. And it is an apt bookend to the formulaic sciences that we're involved in now, which to my sensibilities appear to be forms of ritual magic as well, even though they're done through scientific process as opposed to ritual process. But we've been over this before on the Talamanca Review. allow me to reiterate. Ritual is the antecedent of formula. It is the ancestor of formula. It is the father of formula. Ritual. Think about it. What is a ritual? A ritual is a series of things done in sequence and proportion. Okay? Sequence, timing, and proportion. So the order things are done is important. The time within which things are done are important. And sequence and the proportion of things used in the ritual are important. Okay? And this is why I call it the precursor, the ancestor, the father, the antecedent of formula. Take, for example, a chemical formula, the formula for plastic. If you want to make plastic correctly, there's a formula to it. There's a certain amount of petroleum that's required. There's a number of ingredients. They have to be heated to a certain temperature for a certain period of time. They have to be allowed to cool down within a form so the plastic takes on the form that you want, like a vape liquid bottle. Okay? And so there's a ritual or a formula to the fabrication of something as simple as plastic. There are formulas to the procurement of refined metals in metallurgy. But what I'm getting at here is if you look at the characteristics of a ritual and you look at the characteristics of a scientific process, they're related. Okay? Sequence, timing, and proportion. Those are the three ingredients, okay? And so when you get into high magic, you're dealing all of the holidays, and this is still in the old Christian religious holidays. They're all timed to solstices, right? Seasonal solstices, which are the old pagan holidays, just reinvented. I'm not going to rehash Jordan Maxwell on this podcast, titled Desecration, by the way. But you can do your own research. You'll see what I'm talking about. So, ritual magic is generally reptilian culture, if you want to look at it from an ultra-dimensional or extraterrestrial or an extra-dimensional perspective, okay? It's reptilian, which is why I say we're in the middle of a reptilian takeover, okay? All right. Contemporary usage. So today, consecrate is generally used in two main ways. Religious contexts are the most common one. And this is the core meaning, referring to the formal act of dedicating something or someone to God or a sacred purpose through religious rites. As you've got persons, the bishop will consecrate the new priest at the ceremony next month. She decided to consecrate her life to missionary work. Consecrated virgins are women who have dedicated themselves to a life of prayer and service to the church. So that's consecration related to persons. Places. The new church was consecrated last Sunday, officially opening it for worship. The altar in the chapel was consecrated with holy oil, and here it means to make pure. In relation to persons, it generally refers to dedication, commitment, devotion, or vows. To places, it means purifying them. Objects, during the Mass, the priest will consecrate the bread and wine, transforming them into the body and blood of Christ. In Catholic belief, often referred to as the consecration of the Eucharist. And the chalice and paten used in communion are consecrated vessels. Figurative or secular contexts for the word consecrate in contemporary usage. While less common than the religious usage, consecrate can also be used metaphorically to mean to dedicate something, to dedicate to something deeply and solemnly, like a noble purpose, making it revered or inviolable through profound feeling or action. For example, the soldiers fought to consecrate the ground with their sacrifice for freedom. As in Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our power to add or detract. It's quite the wordsmithy, that Abraham Lincoln. His life was consecrated to the pursuit of justice for the oppressed. So, in summary, consecrate retains its strong historical ties to religious dedication and holiness, but it's also found a place in describing a profound, almost sacred commitment to a non-religious ideal or purpose, which is the defilement of the language. It's the desacralization, the desecration of the word. Okay, it's funny how much you can learn from language. Okay, it's just I'll just say that it is funny how much you can learn from language. So because those words have their origin in religion, any use outside of religion is a desecration of the word. It's the opposite of the consecration. So in a kind of hypnotic irony, we could say that the word consecrate has been desecrated in the 20th century, in the 21st century. Now, we're going to look at desecration, which is the time we're in now. Okay? So defilement is the first phase, and the first phase is defilement is moral and spiritual. Okay? And it's one of the reasons that demonic possession is so rampant now. And that's going to get worse. Okay? It's just going to get worse and worse and worse, and it's because people are so defiled. And the job of the demons is to plague the defiled. That's their job. Don't blame them for doing their job. If you don't want to be plagued by demons, do not defile yourself. Okay? We defiled ourselves by allowing certain aspects of liberalism to completely undo us, namely rooted in the procreative act, what the kids like to call sex. Okay? If there's one thing that has undone the West, it's sex. Nothing has done more than sex. I would tell you, I'll tell you straight up right now, and I'm no expert on these things. I don't use drugs or anything, but I've been all over this world, as you know. I've been in every station of life, as you know. I've lived on the streets. I know people. I can tell you that 70-80% of drug use is to amplify sexual experience. It goes along with coke is rampant in the pornography business. Coke is the drug of choice for orgies. I'm sure coke was flowing through Playboy Mansion in Hugh Hefner's heyday. Okay, so the drugs and sex go together. The root of it all is sex. Okay, it's sex. And this is what has defiled us. And that defilement has reached a pitch now. And the pitch is desecrated families, desecrated children, defiled children. A very sad state of affairs, actually. Very sad. So desecration is the second phase. So defilement is well underway. In fact, I'd say that we are a defiled people in the West now. Now it's interesting to have somebody like me come along and say these things about the West. Because in our communicating with each other, our habit is to point at other nations and say that they're completely lost. Like Iran is a completely lost society. That theocratic regime has to be taken out. Women have to be liberated. And as all of this stuff is being said aloud by both our liberal and our conservative elites in political discourse and media pundits, nobody stops to realize how defiled we are. And that old saying, the biblical adage from Christ, let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. So are we so perfect a society that we decide when other societies are so vile they need to be attacked? You see, we don't see our own dogma. And liberalism has become a dogma. Freedom has become a dogma. And dogmas are always toxic, whether it be Islamic theocratic dogma, Christian theocratic dogma, Jewish theocratic dogma, or liberal political dogma. Dogmas always lead to defilement, desecration, and ultimately decimation. In fact, it is the principal role of dogma to fulfill that trinity: defile, desecrate, decimate. That is the role of dogma. Dogma is the implanted ideology, absent any and all real spiritual value, epigenetically, meaning on a sequence of generations instilled in a people to the point where that dogma blinds them. They cannot see clearly. Remember the beginning of the podcast where I talked about cleansing perception? This is what I mean. Dogma is the antipathy of a cleansed perception. Okay? All right, let's get into desecration. So it's a noun of action derived from the verb desecrate and emerged in the 1670s. That's a very interesting time for it to emerge because that is right around the time of the Catholic Protestant Wars in England. Remember, the Bank of England comes in 1694. You've got John Milton writing Paradise Lost in 1666, around the time desecrate comes in. I wonder if Milton was instrumental in creating this word, right? Very interesting, okay? It's formed from the prefix "de", meaning do the opposite of or undo, combined with the stem of consecrate. So, yeah. To understand desecrate, it's helpful to look at consecrate. So consecrate comes from, we already did that. So the Latin desacere actually meant to make holy, with de acting in a completive or intensive sense. However, when the word desecrate entered English, and likely influenced by Old French desacren, the de prefix took on its more common English meaning of reversal or undoing. Thus, desecrate came to mean the opposite of consecrate, to divest of sacred character or treat with sacrilege. Now, the noun desecration itself is first attested. Attested means to enter the canon of language. Around 1717, just right around the time of the Grand Lodge of Freemasonry in London. It's like that's almost the year Yeah, that's almost the year. I think it was around 1717. So we're getting a tremendous coincidence here. Yeah. Okay, so 1717, very interesting. So today, desecration is commonly used in both religious and secular contexts to describe acts that violate or show extreme disrespect towards something held sacred, hallowed, or greatly valued. And so, yeah, the religion of the West is Christianity. It's been desecrated. It's desecrated in the media every day. They won't say anything about high holy Judaism or high holy Islam, but they have absolutely no problem desecrating Christians, do they? So defilement, desecration. Defilement, desecration. Third phase is decimation. The decimation is underway in Syria. They're literally hunting Christians in Syria now. Okay? So, the desecration of the church by vandals caused widespread outrage, secular contexts. The term is also extended to things that are deeply revered or symbolically important, even if not religious. Examples include many considered the commercial development of the pristine wilderness to be a desecration of nature. Okay, yeah. Anyways, you get the point, right? Consecration and desecration. So we are now officially in the desecration phase. Defilement, we defiled ourselves. Nobody had to do that to us, okay? We defiled ourselves. And look, don't be too hard on yourself, okay? One of the hardest things any society and the individuals therein have to do is cope with success. And the West and North America were the most successful places for 80 years, after World War II, okay? And like I said, I mean, we didn't fare much better than anybody else. The ancient Romans, the Ottomans. Generally, when people are feted with power and privilege and leisure, they spoil, okay? They defile themselves. It's very rare that you see a society that through technology, innovation, or some form of inspiration, this society is given a grace wherein they have time to reflect upon the meaning of life. And very rarely will you see a society use that constructively. Generally, when people have time to relax, what they do is they drink, they fight, and they fuck. Okay? And so there's nothing inherently worse about us than anybody else. Okay? And whoever takes over running this shit show we call planet Earth, whether it's the Chinese or a combination of the Chinese and somebody else, I promise you they'll fuck up in half the time. Okay? Because there's so much power in the world now with our technologies and with the kind of gross domestic products being produced in economies like Europe and America and China. It's the highest levels of wealth we've ever produced on the planet, and like I said, it corrupts. All right. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.